It's
Yeah.
good to finally see Quinn getting his flowers, man. Again, the guy in football is not a perfect game, and the guy isn't. And he did, the best in my opinion that he could with his abilities. Also known as got him a conference championship, went to another, and then got to two Final Fours.
I mean, here's
If ultimately if Arch does that, and now we want him to get over the hump and win it,
of course.
but if he does that, he's going to have a phenomenal career.
Yeah.
What's funny about this, and I love my boy Colt. Colt never won a natty. He did get there, and that's what we want to do, and we want to pass that up. But
Only two guys in Texas history have. So
dude, that's what I'm saying. And so we really need to pump the brakes because I feel like in continuing to have these phenomenal years, fans play a role, and I love when they're fanatic, they're passionate, but we have to keep in mind that you know we can't be as hard as we have. And this is such a unique deal that there's only so many times you have a Manning coming behind him,
Yeah.
and we know how that works per the hype and the anticipation. But again, as I said before, I'm so pumped that Quinn's getting the love he deserved because he did really have a really good few years. He came back to the place he wanted to always go with after Ohio State, and I'm happy that as a fan traveling and seeing what I've seen versus what I did when I was on the radio, it feels a lot better. I promise you that.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing about Quinn, almost a glass half full approach if you're looking at him from an NFL standpoint. Josh put out a great little video on social about why the reasons that he's ready. One thing that if I'm evaluating him, I say this guy, it's a cushier decision to go back to college to make between 4 and 6 million. If that number's real, wow, that's a lot of money on the table
For 1
to,
year.
to go play at Ohio State or Oregon or wherever it is. And he said, no, I'm hungry. I didn't get a national championship in college, but now I want the challenge of the NFL. And to me, that's that like he has the mindset of a competitor. And I think a lot of times a mindset that people um, definitely didn't give him credit for. And I think he ultimately demonstrated that against Alabama, against Michigan on the road, against Arizona State in overtime and double OT, like time and time again, he proved that. And I think to me, if I'm a talent evaluator in the NFL, I'm like, heck yeah, that's the guy that wants the job. He doesn't care if he's a second round pick or a third round pick. Like if I'm drafting a quarterback after the top 15 picks, I want to make sure that this is a kid who wants to be a starting quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah.
And this is the guy that's saying he's not doing, not to like slight Carson Beck. I mean, it's a ridiculous amount of money that guy's making.
Carson Beck had no business declaring at all. I mean, coming off of shoulder surgery and also coming off of probably his worst year as a pro or as a collegiate athlete.
Really, and he's coming off Tommy John. That's worse than shoulder.
He needed that.
Yeah, and he really did, and it made sense. But to co-sign what you're talking about, Toss, I would argue he's looking at that even more realistically than people believe, because if he's drafted late first, second round, he's going to a team that is not an emergency situation.
Right.
He's going where he can train and he can learn. If you truly go back, if you take away Pat Mahomes potentially, who was in the same boat, wasn't he behind Alex Smith for a year or two or something like that?
For
So
sure.
you really look at the guys who have been the most successful. A lot of people have been in those shoes, not very successful.
Almost all of them.
Almost all of them. And so the ones who had a year or two and who were on good teams that drafted the smart and said, I want a really good guy in waiting that can learn, that can be in the meetings. And he's not going to be rushed to, if he's drafted in the top 5, they suck. So if you want a longer career, and they suck last year, if you want a longer career, you go with that team, be the guy in waiting, prove yourself every day, all day, work hard. And then, at the end of the day, even going to the next level, who describes success? What I do know is Colt played 13 years. Didn't start a lot, but that's a very successful NFL career. A guy behind him who never started. Colt actually started at one point. Chase Daniels,
I was
that guy
about to
ended up
say.
making like $40-50 million in the league. So
Yeah.
people just don't get it because, in my opinion, for a guy who's been there, the league is very entertaining, but it's not the most fun you're going to have. It becomes a job as well. First world problem jobs, but go there, prolong your years, make good money, do that for however many years, and Quinn has been insanely smart. This is what people aren't thinking about. He's not going to go to another school and risk the relationships he made at Texas. Because if he played for 10 years, whether he starts or not, and he has $30 million in the bank, he's going to come back here and invest with a great Longhorn and make 10 times more money than he
That's a
ever
good
made in
point.
the league.
Yeah, it's a good
This is the reason I know this is because this is what these kids are doing. We just lost an absolute OG and amazing person, Kevin Washington. But we put together a networking event, and to hear these guys with NL dollars talking about, man, I really want to invest in property. I really want to invest in Airbnbs. I really want to invest in energy. That it's a different conversation. So I think those are the things that, which is awesome about certain levels of them getting paid or the decisions they make that just aren't being considered. And I think he's smarter than people realize for all the reasons that we mentioned.
100%.
Yeah.
And to add to all of this, I mean, there's just such a long discussion that we can have for hours about Quinn, but he was eligible to go to the draft last year. There was talks before the season started, like, hey, should this kid go now? And he stayed back to get that opportunity to win a championship, and obviously it didn't work out. But like, I feel like this is it. This was his last year. He kind of already had his mind made up last season. And if we're looking at the big picture, he's probably top 5 in Longhorn history as a quarterback. I mean, if you really, really break it down, like, there's only a few guys that have had better careers than him. I mean, his resume speaks to it, and he just had so much pressure under him the entire time, looking behind his back with Arch Manning there. The unrealistic expectations to live up to being the number 1 overall, prospect coming out of high school, the transfer from Ohio State, everything. Like, there's just so much that was thrown out at him, and he was able to respond. And on top of that, having some injuries, like, you go back to college and you get injured again, basically getting injured every single season that you've played in college, like, that is such a blemish, and your draft stock is going to plummet.
Right.
So I love the opportunity for him to sit behind a quarterback and get healthy and get bigger and get stronger and learn. We always say that some guys, they go to organizations and they ruin their career based on where they're drafted. I mean, you look at any guy who's been drafted by the Jets, you look at any guy that's been drafted by the Browns, you look at any guy that's been drafted by the Panthers, like, besides Cam Newton. Yeah. But, like, ultimately, being a product of where you're drafted is, like, it's a good thing. Like, he has the opportunity. Maybe we throw the Rams out there a bunch. Like, sit behind Stafford for a couple of years, learn from a Hall of Famer. Get coached up by Sean McVay. You got Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, even though he's aging.
I really like that team for him. No, you know what I mean?
Not to mention, yes, Matthew Stafford's there and McVay, but if they hold on to Jimmy G and he's the third stringer for a second, like, that's a really good guy to learn from too. He played behind Tom Brady for how long? He has a ring. Yes. Yeah, Josh. It's really interesting because it's like he's 21 years old, so you can look at it both ways. On one hand, he has 3 years that he can learn in an NFL system and really sponge it all up. And by the time he's 24, 25, with Jaden Daniels,
Penix's age,
Bo Nix, Michael Penix, right, all those guys, then he'll actually hopefully be ready at that point. Now, I get the counterpoint. The counterpoint is, okay, so if he's going to be ready at 24, why not play one more year at college, make $5 million? But I think you have to give him credit like we're giving credit. It's the long game for him, right? It's having a Colt McCoy type career. It's having, how can I get sustained longevity and wealth for future generations for myself? And that's ultimately, I think, the best way to do it. I mean, you look at a guy like Jason Campbell, right? We've talked to him before. He played at Auburn. He ends up, it's time and time again, the guy goes to the wrong organization and it ruins their entire career, no matter where they were picked in the draft. So circumstances are everything in the NFL, and that's so important. I think that's why he's making the right decision. And look, the Carson Beck thing is like, that thing's puzzling because I don't care what he does at Miami. There's no way I will believe that he's a top 5 quarterback prospect next year. So he's going to have, look, Josh, you make that face, but going into this season, he was.
Oh, I agree. No, I agree. I think he's going to Miami to get booty. That's it. His girlfriend's there. He's going to be. It's the truth, man. Like, that's
double on
booty and money.
Yeah.
I'm just the Quinn, the whole enigma around Quinn. You said it, Nick. He was built up as the prospect of all prospects. And in all things considered, he played 3 years for us. And he's third all time in yards, third in touchdowns, third in completions, behind Sam, behind
2
Colt.
semifinal appearances.
2 semifinal appearances behind Sam, behind Colt, who have an extra year.
Conference championship.
Conference championship. His
Winning
intercept.
record, winning record against
Yeah.
A&M.
Yeah. I
One of them.
I look at Quinn and I'm like, first of all, other than Herbert, I can't remember a time where a guy went back to school and it actually really like helped his draft stock a lot. Matt Barkley failed him. Jake Locker, still a first round pick, but he dropped. Liner dropped. More often than not, it dropped. If you're in what better position are you going to maybe Ohio State with the receivers and the offense and Chip Kelly there? But even that's a risk. Like, because what if you go there, you get, like Nick said, you get hurt again, or it doesn't work out as well? All things considered, Sark's offensive program is as difficult as it can be and as complex as it can be. And you're built up for that NFL success and to succeed in the NFL and run an NFL offense. And like you guys are all saying, look, had he been the first overall pick this year, am I going to be upset? Hell no. And I can't say, oh, I'm glad he's not going to be, because if he was going to be the first overall pick, that means he had an insane season, probably won the Heisman, and we're going to the Natty. So I can't be like, oh, thank God he's not the first overall pick. But glass half full, if he goes to a place like Los Angeles, like you're saying, if he goes to the Niners and sits behind Brock Purdy, whose job's a bit murkier there all of a sudden, if he goes to Seattle and sits behind Geno Smith and things are looking up for them and they're a really good organization, there's a lot of Pittsburgh, there's a lot of places he can go where he can sit and hold the clipboard behind veteran guys, get acclimated to the league, and come in hopefully at 22 or 23 if he's ready. He's a young guy and he's already learned a ton and he's had a lot of success. Like, heavy lies the crown when you come to Texas. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what it is. Like, and at the end of the day, like you're saying, Quan, like having these relationships that could have still been there, but they're not as, shiny and appreciated versus if you go to another university versus finishing your career in the burnt orange. And you said it. He always wanted, this is where he's from. He wanted to be Texas's quarterback. He's a Texas kid. He wanted his last snaps to be in the burnt orange. So why just go to another place when this is where your heart is?
100%. And I think another thing that we consider too is that if he's not on Texas, right, and let's just say he played how he played, right, the stats, all of that, the throws that he made, the audibles that he made, if he's doing that for a Wyoming or he's doing that for a North Carolina or whoever, right, a smaller school than Texas, are we talking about him differently? Are we saying that he's actually has a better opportunity? Because Josh Allen didn't ever make it to the college football playoff or win, a ring or anything like that. He didn't have a great record at Wyoming, but he was a top 7 overall pick in the NFL draft, right? Like, you still got to look at the characteristics that this kid has and the intangibles that people thought he had coming out of high school, and, the arm talent and the decision-making. Like, that's what an NFL scout looks at. Obviously winning is a big part of it, but so much of it is also, how can we coach this kid to be an NFL talent? He's got all the tools we need. Let's put him in the right system. Let's give him the right receivers. That's what I want to see. And I seriously think that if he's at a different school, he might be talked about better.
I think he's definitely getting criticized way less, right? I think ultimately he'd probably end up around the same place as to where he's going to get picked. But a lot of that has to do with who the other quarterbacks are in this particular quarterback class. I think there's a lot of time before the draft actually happens. And I think a lot of people are going to understand and appreciate him in the way that we're talking about him now, and these intangibles and the fact that he's being coached by Sark, I think will eventually buoy him up the ranks. And again, it's a pretty weak quarterback class. So I'm not saying he's going to be a late first rounder, but I'd be surprised if he's picked in the 3rd round.
Yeah, I would be too. To that point, Genty, who I think is freaking insane and special, does he have the numbers he has in a Power 5? So I think competition, playing for Texas is all a really, really big point for Nick. It's the pressure. And let's be real, even playing for Texas is different with Arch Manning behind you. That's just the truth. So
we've never seen that circumstance for Quinn this year is never going to be replicated ever by another college quarterback.
For anyone.
I don't even care about the Rattler, Caleb. Caleb Williams into that game. Did we as Texas Longhorn fans know anything maybe besides the fact that he was a big recruit? I didn't know the guy's name, and then all of a sudden he's running for a touchdown. I'm like, oh my god, this guy's better than
Well,
Spencer Rattler.
Yeah,
I
no,
knew his
exactly.
name pretty quickly. I'll
No,
tell you that.
I know, but you know, every Oklahoma fan, every Wyoming fan, every UNC fan, every Duke fan knows who Arch Manning
Yeah,
is now.
dude, we get it. We hear about it. So that's what I'm saying. I think the circumstances were so polarizing because of that family that, again, Quinn at a different team. Quinn, I think the competition level, the dude is he can make every throw. So if he's not playing, which of course you can say, well, he better get better for in that scenario, which is not always all his fault. But if he's not playing Georgia's defense that has 6 first rounders on there, it's just a different game. And so I'm not giving him an excuse, but I am saying the combination of that and the polarizing backup, which no one talks about. Who was Vince Young's backup? Again, that's a tough example because we won a natty. Who easy? Who was Colts back?
Was it Matt Nordgren? Who was it?
Was it
Nordgren?
at one point. It was different ones, but it was Chance Mock who took the job. Then there's Matt Nordgren. I know him because I was on the team. Who was Colts backup?
Garrett Gilbert.
For 1 year, right?
For 1 year. No, that was it. Because Garrett Gilbert was a true freshman. And so again, the point is, you know them if they play in the natty. And by the way, we can name that because we're Longhorns. Like to Toss's point, there's people in New York who can name Arch Manning being behind Quinn, in Alaska and Hawaii. And so that's what's so fun
There's
about
people who
what
don't even
Manning
follow
did.
college football that still know his name. Like, oh
Well,
yeah,
and the truth of the matter is there's now talk well, the NCAA is back. And Arch as a backup was talked about and being considered on the cover of it. So that's what he dealt with. And
he
Ian
played one game, his first game back, and then his Heisman odds spike up to like top 10 and Heisman.
Dude, we had 2 people in the Heisman odds.
Yeah, because he was
crazy.
nasty.
That was
One of them ended up
that's it
making
in
it.
a nutshell. The only
That's it in a
circumstance
nutshell.
I could liken
And
it
so
to.
kudos for how he handled it. Kudos for the winning that he actually did do. He beat Ohio. Again, think about his senior year. Casey McCoy has still been talked about for beating Oklahoma and A&M. Well, Quinn did that in a year and multiple times. So
and went into Michigan and beat that ass.
And went into Michigan and did that. Went into Tuscaloosa and did that. The dude did. He gave us some unbelievable experiences and memories, and I wish him the best at the next level. And but both can be true. I can equally be excited for what Arch is going to bring to the table and the recruiting and all that we need to fill the gaps and get back to top, because ultimately Arch hype alone, I think we're going to probably be top 2.
Yeah, we're going to be number 1 with Arch.
He's the favorite right now. He's the favorite right now to win the Heisman. We're technically the favorite next year to win it all, which we're losing all these guys to the draft, but we're still the favorite.
Which is fascinating.
But
hey,
if it all
the story, we're in a good place.
Oh yeah. Well, if it goes according to plan, right? Let's say this all works out, right? He wins the Heisman, he wins the Natty. He's only a Texas starting quarterback for 1 year. He's definitely going to the league, right?
Yeah, if you go first, you go first, I think. And I don't think it's crazy that we're could potentially be preseason ranked 1. And as hyped as Arch is, and the Heisman thing is hilarious, and it's all funny, and it's all like, I think again, like we're saying, good for Quinn. The situation that can almost liken it to is Tua and Jalen Hurts, where Tua is really breathing and even came into the game in the national championship, and actually Jalen does what Quinn didn't do and transfers, right? And look what happened. First of all, look what happens to Jalen Hurts. Oh, Jalen Hurts, not a first-round pick, goes in the second round. I don't think Jalen Hurts is too upset right now. I think Jalen Hurts is A-okay with where he ended up and how he's doing. So, like, again,
to get into to the Nat, I mean, to the, I don't know. Jalen Hurts is good, but also maybe his decision worked out perfectly. If Jalen Hurts doesn't play for Philly, he has a very different career.
Oh yeah, but it's all where you go.
That stuff that is just
push.
Wow.
Like, the teams are doing that.
Yeah, they're not doing that in Jacksonville.
They gave him like 75% of his touchdowns.
Yeah. So I think Quinn. The Quinn thing was a huge success, and I don't think it. Ooh, we're back, baby. Horns up, talking Texas podcast. Fisher DeSopolis, DJ, Nikki, Snacks, Kreider, the Quan Cosby. Those listening on ESPN 102.7 Austin. What up? We've unfortunately but officially entered the off season for football. Before we get into anything, I got to tell you guys, we are now brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Very exciting. Underdog Fantasy is available in 30 states. Super simple, fun fantasy app. Sign up. Use the code STRIPE, capital STRIPE, all caps. Get a bonus pick and up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Really fun. Go check it out. We've had a good time over there. And it's one of the games, you're playing higher or lower on fantasy points for players, and that's going into the NFL divisional round. So sign up, use the code, get on Underdog Fantasy, play the game, win money, win big. Very exciting stuff.